Have you ever wondered how some guitar players just seem to sound more interesting when they play lead guitar? They could be using all the same scales that you know how to play, but for some reason when they play it, it sounds better. Because I used to think exactly the same thing, and I still do, but I did come across a new way of thinking which then started to change how my guitar playing sounded and started to make it more interesting to my ears. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to try and offer another kind of perspective, a way of playing rather than what to play, and hopefully stop people being a little bit stuck and getting a little bit bored of the way that their guitar playing sounds. So if that sounds interesting, then make sure you stick around. So first things first, I want to talk about something that I like to refer to as linear guitar playing. And it's something that I used to do. It's something that I kind of still do now, every now and again. But it's one of the things that I think a lot of guitar players actually do without realizing. And it's kind of a trap that we fall into, which leaves our guitar playing sounding a certain way, not how we would potentially like it to sound. So what am I talking about? What is linear guitar playing? Now, if you think of the word linear, that just refers to a straight line. And Google says it's progressing from one stage to another in a single series of steps, sequential. That's a much better way of putting it. So again, how does that relate to the guitar? So let me kind of show you what I mean. So if we have a scale, and the scale I'm going to use in this video is the major scale. So I'm going to play in the key of A as well. The major scale sounds something like this. So starting from my root note of A, which is the 5th fret, I've just played the A major scale. And if you know anything about scales, and I'm hoping you do if you're watching this video, that is just a template, a guide, a framework giving me every single note that I can use in the key of A in this instance. If I played that scale somewhere else, if I played it on the 3rd fret at G, I've got all of the notes that belong to G, so I can play in G. But in this case, we're in the key of A major. So a lot of people might learn the scale, and then when it comes to actually trying to use that scale to improvise and to play lead guitar, they just literally play the scale in a straight line, linear, which might sound something like this. I've got a backing track here in the key of A, and I'm going to play the scale very linear. It sounds absolutely fine. All of those notes work perfectly over the backing track because they're in the right key, but it's just not very interesting. It's very linear, and as Google says, I'm just progressing from one stage to another in a single series of steps. So if I relate that to the scale, I'm progressing from one note to the next in just steps. Literally from one note straight to the next note in the scale, to the next note in the scale, to the next note, and I'm not making any more interesting choices. I could even break it up into little phrases and do something like this. You know, I'm still just going up between the notes. I could even go backwards as well. And I could even kind of jump back and forwards a little bit, but I'm only jumping back and forwards to either the note before or the note after. So I could do this sort of thing. You get the point. Sounds more interesting straight away just by kind of having a little bit of a back and forth kind of thing, but I'm still only going between one note and straight to the next one or the one below it. Very, very linear. Now, linear, it's just a phrase that I've come up with, but there might be other words that describe it, but this is the way that it makes sense to me. So the main thing that I'm trying to get across here is let's try and break out of that mindset of just playing up through the scale or down through the scale, because you might have heard the saying before, people say you learn scales and then the next challenge is learning how to make it not sound like you're using a scale. Playing in a very linear way like this very much sounds like you're just using a scale. So the obvious thing is to just try and break out of those habits. Easier said than done. So what we're going to do is we're going to play a root note. That's the 5th fret, that's our A note. Now normally if you were going to play linear, obviously the next note would be the 2, which is the 7. So in this case, don't play the 7, play the root and jump to the 3rd. So I went from the 1st note to the 3rd note. Straight away, I've made a more interesting note choice then. I've gone up an interval of a third. Interval just refers to the distance from one note to the next. I've gone up from the root to a third. A third interval, which is actually a nice harmony, by the way. So I've gone up a root to a third. And instead of going to the fourth, I could jump to the fifth. Which is basically me playing an arpeggio. I'm actually playing the notes there that are outlined in an A major chord. But that's a different subject altogether, talking about that. But you get the point where I'm trying to go with this. I'm just trying to miss out some notes though, so that my guitar playing doesn't sound as straightforward. So from that 5, 1, 3, 5, maybe, and you don't always have to skip notes, I could go to the next note in the sequence, which would be a 6, but then I could jump to my octave. And that's a more interesting phrase straight away than just playing every single note that exists. What does that sound like over the track? I think that sounds more interesting already. It's not the most interesting thing, don't get me wrong, but it's more interesting and it's getting me out of that linear habit. So what I want to do as well is I want to sort of try and work on that a little bit more. So what I want to do is, without the backing track for the time being, and this is actually going to be harder than it seems at first, is I want to try and use that major scale, and I want to try and use all of those notes. So I'm going to try and play a group of 4 notes, and every single note I play is going to be on a different string. Because that's a really easy way of just breaking out of that, just going up through the notes sort of thing. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to play 4 random notes now, each one on a different string. I'll start on a root note. 4 more. 4 more. 4 more. And you see where I'm going with this. Every single time I play a note, I'm just using as many notes as I can. I'm trying to not repeat myself and go to the same notes all the time, which is quite hard because you just kind of get familiar with where certain notes are, and the temptation is to go back to those. Try and not do that. You get the point. Now I know it sounds really random. It's supposed to. It's not supposed to sound like these are the phrases that are going to save your guitar playing. But it's, again, it's the mindset. So if I bring the backing track in, I'm going to try and use that now over the backing track and just try and keep that idea going, but with some music, and just see how it sounds now. It might not sound perfect. We're just kind of trying to break out of the norm. Kind of. You get the idea. It's actually harder than it seems. Now, what I want to try and do, because it doesn't sound the best, sometimes some phrases do sound good if you kind of literally go from one note to the next one in the scale. So I want to basically try and combine those two different ideas now. So I'm going to try and play about with it more now, where I'm going to try and use some of the more familiar little runs up using the scale, but I'm going to also try and then jump every now and again to some higher notes and lower notes and things like that. So what I'll do now, to make it a little bit more interesting, I'll try and jam with a bit more of a better lead guitar tone and see what happens. the idea. I was trying to play there and I was trying to be more interesting with what I was doing. It's easier said than done, as I said. You'll find yourself kind of going back to habits, but it's also about when you realize that you're doing that to then try and break out of it and make a bigger jump between the notes and things like that. Stop being so linear, and you'll be amazed what that does for your guitar playing. It's one of those things you just try and implement every now and again and hope over time it just becomes how you actually play. And that's just another little example of the same idea in a different key, you know, just trying to keep that same mindset going. I'm playing about, I'm kind of doing some sort of normal phrases, linear phrases, mixing it in with some bigger jumps here and there between some notes, you know, just little things like going from, if I'm playing this note, I'll jump to a higher string rather than between this 7th fret and this 10th fret on the high E, 7th fret on the B, 10 on the high E. I had all these notes, but instead of just playing all those notes, I just jumped from one to the next. That kind of thing. So hopefully this has been somewhat useful. It's quite a hard subject to teach, and I just think it's one of those things that after a while the penny drops and you start to implement this stuff. It's just one of those things, if you are kind of bored of your guitar playing and how it sounds, then, you know, maybe this could be the answer to at least going from boring playing to slightly more entertaining for yourself. Anyway guys, I'm going to leave the video there, but before I do, if anyone is interested, I do actually teach online guitar lessons. If you enjoyed this video or any of my other guitar lesson videos and you think that I might be able to help you with some parts of your guitar playing, then don't hesitate to get in touch. My email address is in the top of the description. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to contact me and hopefully we can sort something out. Anyway guys, as I said, going to leave the video there. If you did like this video, don't forget to leave it a like, leave me a comment and let me know what you think. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, then please do. I make lots of guitar and music related content and hopefully I'll see you next time.